So what happens when there is the next emergency, and maybe it's not, maybe it's a war?
Maybe it's a war. Maybe it's an economic collapse.
Well, that's right. So how do we respond when we're told to abandon the Bill of Rights, our birthright? How do we respond?
As I said, we resist. The Constitution was written for hard times. It wasn't written for easy times. It was written for hard times. And you know, and I've said this to you before, Tucker, that during the American Revolution, there were two large epidemics. One of them, a malaria epidemic that decimated the armies of Virginia, and then there was a smallpox epidemic that decimated the Army of New England at the very time that Benedict Arnold, who was our greatest general, our greatest military strategist during the war, had captured the city of Montreal and captured Canada. And because of the smallpox epidemic and the American troops, he didn't have the manpower to hold the city and had to withdraw. Otherwise, Canada today would be part of the United States. And the framers of the Constitution knew that. And between the end of the Revolution and 1792, when we ratified the Bill of Rights, through that 10-year period, there were epidemics in every city in our country: malaria epidemic, smallpox, yellow fever, cholera, typhus, typhoid, that killed tens of thousands of people, decimated population. All the framers knew about that, but they did not put an epidemic exception in the United States Constitution. And during the Civil War, the Confederates were sending agents provocateurs northward into U.S. cities to drum up draft riots. And those draft riots were threatening the entire structure of Union society and the military efforts. And Abraham Lincoln, in an effort to avert any more draft riots, began arresting these Confederate agent provocateurs when they came into the northern cities, before they did anything wrong. That was a violation of habeas corpus. But he said, we've got to do it because it's vital for the life of our nation. At that time, over 600,000 Americans had died in the Civil War. And it's the equivalent of 12 to 15 million people dying today. And our country was being torn apart, and we didn't know if it was going to survive. So the life of the nation was at stake. And that case, that habeas corpus, his habeas corpus declaration was challenged in the Supreme Court. And Justice Roger Taney said, you can't do it. Even if the life of the nation is at stake, even if tens of thousands of lives are at stake, you can't do it. It's the Constitution. It was written for hard times. There is no circumstance in which it can be waived. And I think that we all have to remember that.
Tucker, can I?
Do you foresee, you said resist. I remember growing up, you know, nonviolent resistance in the name of civil liberties was considered a great virtue, the most American of all virtues. I don't hear that anymore. But is that what you foresee?
I would say, you know, we all have a duty to do that. We all have a duty to resist in whatever way is going to be most effective in resisting the tyranny. And, you know, and we, you know, right now, Tucker, it's really more important than ever and it's going to take more courage than ever. And it'll probably take, you know, whatever it's going to take. It's going to take more than we've ever given. And the reason for that is because of the emergence of all of these new technologies for surveillance and control. And we all know about them. I mean, you know, that AI, the emergence of AI is going to allow the intelligence agencies, powerful entities, not only to control us, but to warp our vision, our understanding of reality. And we already have all of it's been the ambition of every totalitarian system in the history of mankind to control every aspect of human behavior, our interactions with each other, our relationships, our communications, our transactions, our movements, the books we read, our letters to each other, communications with each other. Of course, they've never been able to do that, but now they can. They can look at everything. And you all have had this experience. 2 years ago, my wife and I, in the privacy of our bedroom, were talking about the fact that our mattress was becoming saggy. The next morning, both of us got 3 mattress ads on our cell phones. And that's when it brought it home to me that, they're listening to everything we say all the time.
Did you replace the mattress?
I replaced my cell phone.
Tucker, can I?
We have all these devices. You have GPS. A lot of you are wearing GPS watches. We have GPS in our cell phone that is tracking us all the time. We have GPS in our car. There's facial recognition systems. There are now permits issued for 415,000 low-altitude satellites that are going to circle the globe or that are stationary across the globe all the time. Bill Gates' company has 65,000 permits for satellites. He says his company alone is going to be able to look at every square inch of the earth 24 hours a day. So, and we all have Siri and Alexis in our home. It's very convenient, but Siri is not working for you. Siri is working for Bill Gates and for these companies that are monetizing the data. And every time you cough, every time you sneeze, every time your baby cries, Siri knows it, and that's being logged somewhere. All these communications, our conversations with each other are all being logged. This isn't paranoid. Corporations are doing this because they're mining our data in order to monetize it. But the same companies that are mining our data are also sharing that data with the NSA, and all of it's stored somewhere. And for all the reasons that human beings have been in democracies have been paranoid about government keeping track of their private conversations, of their personal interactions. We need to be worried about that today. And all of these technologies mean that it's going to be very, very difficult for us to hold on to our constitutional rights in the coming decades. And particularly if President Trump loses this election and Kamala Harris wins, I don't think there's any consciousness in the Democratic Party that this is a bad thing. I think the Democratic Party now believes to no longer trust the public. They don't trust the demos. They believe that the public needs to be controlled, that the information we get needs to be controlled. It has to be censored, that the big threat to us is disinformation and misinformation, which is anybody who tells you that is lying to you. Anybody who tells you that is trying to manipulate you.
But
You're a big person. You can make up your own mind about what is true and not true. My kids do it. I say to my kids, look at this posting on Instagram where the dog is eating the alligator, and they're like, Dad, you need to fact check that. So everybody knows that you got to do research, right? And that you don't believe everything you read on the internet. Louis Brandeis, our justice, Supreme Court justice, said that the remedy for bad information is more information. It's never censorship. Censorship is a way to control.
Bobby, speaking of President Trump, you've endorsed him for a number of reasons, but he did give us Operation Warp Speed. To what degree do you hold him culpable for succumbing to the fear you've talked about?
Well, I absolutely hold him culpable, but here's what, and for a lot of other things, that I disagreed with in the first Trump administration. I didn't like seeing Scott Gottlieb cash in at FDA and Alex Azar running HHS. and oil lobbyists running the Interior Department, coal lobbyists running EPA, telecommunication lobbyists running the FCC, et cetera. I talked to President Trump at length about this, and he said, look, when I get elected in 2016, I didn't know how to govern, and to tell you the truth, it was kind of surprising that we won the election. And he said, I was immediately inundated by lobbyists and business people, and they were all saying, you appoint this guy, appoint that guy, appoint that guy. And he said, I did it, and I wish I hadn't. And he understands that Scott Gottlieb was cashing in, and he did $100 billion favor for Pfizer, and then went back to work for Pfizer on his board of directors. And so I think that President Trump has said to me that we're going to do something different this time, and that's why he launched the transition team 5 months before he takes power. The last time he did his transition team, he started in January. He's now launched it. I'm on it. Tulsi's on it. Donald Jr. is on it, and I had an impression that Donald Jr. was kind of a lightweight, but I've gotten to know him, and he's exactly the opposite of that. He's very thoughtful, he's really well-informed, and he understands who the bad guys are. He does not like the neocons. He does not like the constant wars. He does not. He wants to restore public health. He loves the environment. He loves the rivers and the streams and the waterways, and he wants to protect those things. And I have nothing but respect for him, and there's a lot of really, really good energy that is part of this transition team now.
So that leads to my. I agree with your assessment of Don Jr. completely, and as you know, having lived around famous people your whole life, the perceptions of people are sometimes accurate, sometimes are the opposite of what you're told, and he's definitely in that category. How do you envision your role in a Trump administration?
President Trump has asked me specifically to do two things. One, to help unravel the capture of the agencies by corrupt influence. In other words, to drain the swamp. And I had to say something about President Trump. President Trump has some extraordinary gifts, and one of them is that he has very, very good instincts. And that when he came out the first time, you remember, he was very against the lockdowns publicly. He was for hydroxychloroquine. He was for alternative medicines. He was against the mass. He was doing, but all of he was surrounded by bureaucrats who, and knowledgeable experts who, ultimately pushed back on those assumptions and got us into some policies that I think were really bad for our country. He's not going to do that again. And he wanted to end the wars. He said back then, we don't want to go into a Ukraine war. I'd rather make a deal than have a war. So I think that, and he's asked me to do that, and he's asked me to help him end the childhood disease, chronic disease epidemic, and make Americans healthy again.
And if given the power to do that, what'll you do?
That's unclear, because there's no, at this point, thank you. Like I said, I'm on the transition committee, and there's no, we don't have, I don't have a post for myself that's picked out. I know that I'm going to be deeply involved in helping to choose the people who can run FDA and NIH and CDC in a way that restores public health rather than.
Can you imagine if you're at FDA or NIH and Bobby Kennedy all of a sudden? I mean, they must be dying. They must be dying.
But I'll bring in people to run those agencies like Callie Means, like Casey Means. And
you think they're gonna, I mean, they have nightmares about that.
yeah, they should.
Yeah, and they should. Bobby Kennedy, thank you. May they have more nightmares. Larry Elder, thank you very much.